is your World War III update. You're going to have to pardon my rather sunken appearance today. I am on a calorie deficit. I am mentally discombobulated. I'm going to do my level best to try to present this information in one of the most coherent and comprehensive ways humanly possible. I'm trying to fast so I can cut the weight, so I can run fast, so I can run far, and I can pack a lot of weight on my back if and when the crap hits the fan. I let myself go sitting in that tractor on the homestead last year. I'm not gonna have that happen again. Now, what you're seeing behind me here is a building burning in Kiev. Most people are thinking that the war has ended. In fact, it's only ramped up. A massive drone attack on Ukraine, as well as the Ukrainians reciprocating in kind and attacking numerous locations throughout Russia, including attempting once again to destroy the Crimean Bridge. Now understand that this is a critical piece of Russian infrastructure. And indeed, it is also something that is very symbolic, so that if the Ukrainians were at this point in time to actually destroy the Crimean Bridge, well, that would really put a wrench in any prospective peace negotiations that are currently pretending to be underway. And I'm saying pretending to be underway because what you're seeing is pure smoke and mirrors. I know it seems quite convincing because you're seeing all these deals being made, and the Russians, however, are quite perplexed about this. In fact, the deputy foreign minister and Vladimir Putin himself are quite concerned. They're saying to themselves, we haven't been presented with any plan yet. We just hear Trump basically oscillating and contradicting himself one day to the next with respect to what the plan is going to be for Ukraine. Now, I should note before we get into that, the individual who shot this video of what's going on in Kiev, remember, there's an information blackout there because they're under a military dictatorship right now, and if you were to post something like this without the approval of the Ukrainian SBU, you're basically going to jail. So I presume that this was green-lit. They only green-light the attacks that are the collateral damage or the wayward missiles that don't hit their intended targets, many of which we come to find later on are interceptors, Ukrainian interceptors that miss their target and just happen to land on a Ukrainian house. Unfortunately, that individual was probably one of the poor schmucks who was hauled off the street against their will, like this guy here, who's biking down the road. Take a look at this, biking down the road, and here is the commissar, pushes him off his bike, okay? They get the van ready. This is how they're recruiting in Ukraine. Now you have to ask yourself, where are Elon Musk and Donald Trump when they're talking about Ukraine being a dictatorship? Why aren't they showing, like, what more proof of that could you possibly need but this? And I'm not seeing them post these types of videos. Like, look at this. 6 of these guys, this guy's on his way to work, who knows where he's off to, and he basically gets scooped off the street. Not just scooped off the street, pushed off his bike, okay? So that's what's going on in Ukraine. That's the reality. Now, understand, I'm going to try to help you make sense of this deal, which is really just an extortion racket. It's a Halliburton-like slush fund for U.S. industrial interests, and likely Zelensky agreed to this because there's going to be a lot of kickbacks for them as well. So Zelensky's coming to town on Friday. To town, I mean Mar-a-Lago or White House or wherever they're going to meet with Donald Trump, who, of course, has been rather back and forth and using some very aggressive rhetoric, like he always does. This is a, inveterate way that Trump communicates with his opponents, and not really opponents, even his allies, okay? And it's really losing, it's no longer convincing for a lot of people, because people see Trump basically proposing these outlandish deals to people and then walking it back, and it's something that's diluted to about 10%. So remember what the initial deal was with Trump and Zelensky. It was, we basically get half your shit, we get royalties, and we're going to take half the top off of what you make on your ports. And, it was just one of the most nobody would accept the deal, and nobody would politically survive if they had accepted this deal, okay? And also, Ukraine was on the line to pay back the United States $500 billion, when arguably, based on some accounts, the United States has only given and granted, I should say, Ukraine $100 billion. So you can't kind of walk back, you can't give somebody and then say, oh, you owe us something for it later on. So that's Ukraine's grievance. And of course, they feel entitled because they have expended probably untold amounts of blood and sweat and tears into this conflict. Anyways, Trump basically backpedaled and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to give you security guarantees, even though they have to for any of this to work. But we're going to basically create this fund that is going to be managed by the U.S. partly. I believe 50% of it is going to be managed by the U.S. And we're going to get to dictate how Ukraine is rebuilt. So this is a Halliburton racket. That's all this is. So they're going to be able to charge like $10,000 for a chair on the basis of this money. So it's just going to be a slush fund for the military industrial complex, period, point blank. It's going to be a way that American industry can somewhat prosper off of Ukraine's rebuilding, if we even get there, okay? Now, the thing is that in this agreement, there is not included a security guarantee from the United States, which is what the Ukrainians were asking for. But remember, what the Ukrainians actually got out of this is way better than what was initially proposed, because they don't even have to give the U.S. any money. They're basically just saying, okay, well, they are. They make no mistake about it. They're getting, this is a colonial arrangement. There's no doubt about that. But at least, in the very least, they're going to get a $10,000 chair out of the deal, okay, as opposed to nothing. Now, even though they don't get security guarantees, if you are wanting to build the infrastructure in order to mine the rare earth minerals that are not really that rare, it's not so much that they're rare, they're just difficult to extract. And as such, you need a lot of expertise and specialized equipment. And above all else, you need something that you can ensure is not just going to be destroyed or see long breaks in production as a result of, I don't know, the Russians invading. So that is going to necessitate security guarantees. So the security guarantees are baked in. Understand that any deal with Ukraine entails the United States continuing to arm them. Why else would the U.S. ever enter into, or why else would Ukraine ever enter into such a one-sided deal, like when they're not getting anything out of it? What they're getting out of it is the unwritten part of it, which is, of course, that the United States is essentially going to underwrite this whole process, and they are going to provide Ukraine with the, I suppose, the weapons to continue to, in the very least, keep the Russians guessing. Now, of course, what's going to happen is that there's going to be this peace creeping, mission creeping group on the ground. Now, the Kremlin is denying Trump's claim that it agreed to plans for British international peacekeepers. And this is all part of this desultory negotiation tactics that Trump is utilizing. And, you know, it's hard to say that it's calculated. It really does just seem like he's flying by the seat of his pants, and he's trying to, he's just throwing anything out there. And the problem with that is that that works, and that might intimidate some people for a short period of time until people start to realize, oh, okay, this is just Trump's typical bloviation and bluster, and we don't really have to take it seriously, and he's likely going to walk it back 90% of what he initially proposed anyways. So what you're going to have happen here is that the Brits 100% are going to be sending troops into that region. But the problem is that the Brits, and most of Europe for that matter, does not have the troops currently in order to do this, at least so they claim. If they say that they need 30,000 troops, that's on a rotation basis, so really they need about 4 times that amount, because you got to give guys a break before they go back in. And of course, that is going to be a potential tripwire And it's going to be very enticing for Ukraine, who might want to instigate a fight between NATO and Russia, to refrain from, I don't know, doing a false flag on those troops in an attempt to bait NATO into a conflict with Russia. But most importantly of all, okay, you need to understand that what we're seeing right now, what we're hearing about, all of this negotiation and peace plan, have you heard what the peace plan is going to be? You probably haven't, and neither have the Russians. In fact, Sergei Ryabkov, this is the perfect, they got to make a meme of this. I mean, just this facial expression says it all. He's like, we don't understand what your peace plan is. I mean, what is your peace plan? Okay, so you've basically negotiated with Ukraine to continue providing them weapons, right? We appreciate your more congenial approach. We appreciate that you are, at least extending an olive branch of sorts diplomatically, but we don't understand exactly what you're trying to do here. And understand, for us, we can be a bit more flippant about this whole thing because we're on the other side of the map. But for the Russians, this is existential. And you can tell by Vladimir Putin's very incisive scowl. You know when Putin is scowling, he is focused and he is tense. Watching his body language over the last 3 years, you get to kind of understand his baseline. And in the most recent videos that we've seen throughout this supposed peace negotiation process, which is in its nascent phases, but nonetheless, you would think that hearing all this great stuff, he would be a little more upbeat and relaxed, but he is not, because he understands exactly what is going on here, and they're not buying it. They're not buying it for a second, because they understand that this dilatory tactic that Trump is employing by trying to postpone what ultimately is going to be an impasse between the Russians and the Americans, when, of course, the Russians are pressing and pressing as they are now. They're making headway across the entire front, okay? Now, as they ultimately start making ground and as they start potentially threatening the Western interests inside Ukraine, potentially of the peacekeeping, or what are they calling it now, reaction force, then that is when you reach a point where you see what everybody is truly thinking, okay? And that is what Putin is worried about. Because he understands, number one, that now Europe is going to be heavily militarized. They didn't have to worry about that before. They just had to worry about the United States possibly getting involved in a nuclear sense. Now you have all these European countries who are going to ramp up their military spend, probably to the tune of well over $1 trillion every year, and they're going to do it rapidly. So they have to deal with that militarization on their doorstep. They're still having their shadow fleet sabotaged. They're still having problems in the Baltic Sea with hybrid warfare. They're still being bombarded right now. In fact, as I told you before, the Crimean Bridge was one of the most recent targets, as well as basically throughout the whole country. Day after day, the war continues to rage. So don't believe for a second these bombastic claims by Trump that everything is going to be fine. There is nothing that suggests that other than a commitment to talk, which is something. But as I've said in the past, and as Putin himself has warned, if you break the ice in the wrong way, if you don't have a plan to go into talks, it can actually be worse than not talking at all. Because at least if you hold out the prospect for talks, then there's a possibility that maybe you can reconcile things in the future, and that in itself could be a hedge against full-blown escalation. But once you cross that line, and once Rubio and Lavrov and Putin and Trump, once the photo op is concluded, and if nothing has been resolved after that, that's when we enter truly dangerous territory. And understand, though, that the Russians are going to try to exploit this as much as possible. This is what's going on in Russia right now. by the way. Another oil refinery up in smoke, okay? The Russians are not going to push, the United States away at all. They're going to embrace this because it's good for Putin politically. It's good for their economy, even though it mostly is a facade. So they're going to take it. But they're going to understand exactly the type of skullduggery that is currently happening with this postponement of the inevitable talks with respect to what's going to happen. Now, I don't think that a person like Marco Rubio can be tasked with a peace negotiation, a lifelong neocon. I just don't see it happening, but, I mean, anything is possible. We're in the end game anyway, so, they might surprise us. These are just some of the pathways of drone strikes today, intended, of course, for the Kerch Bridge. And if they were to take out the Kerch Bridge at this point, we would see likely a massive retaliation on a scale that we probably haven't seen in the war so far. This is I believe it's a B-52 nuclear bomber flying over Estonia as a show of support for Estonia. This, of course, is an American plane flying with F-16s possibly. And, just another show of force and a reminder that no matter what they say, this is what the Russians are not naive in the way that we are all naive to the media and we just believe whatever they say. Oh yeah, peaceful, everybody's smiling. Well, Putin is not smiling. Now he's offering to sell the Americans aluminum, okay? So the Russians are being serious about this. They actually are incredibly judicious, and they are, they have a whole plan. They probably have reams of legalese written out already in preparation for what may or may not come. I don't think you have that on the other side. I mean, we've seen with the tariffs, the Canadians came ready for a tariff war, and Trump just postponed it because I don't even think they have a plan, to be honest. I think they're just shooting by the hip. And if you're doing that with the Russians, then eventually it's going to have a kinetic outcome. Now, the results of the German election, the Conservative Party there was elected, who is, at least prior to the election, stated their unwavering support for Ukraine. And now the German Chancellor, that was probably not a German Chancellor, I can't do German. Candidate Friedrich Merz wants to change the Taurus policy, so they want to send Taurus missiles to Ukraine. So likely we're going to see a ramping up of military expenditure on the German front to Ukraine. We're seeing all kinds of talks of dissolution of NATO and blah, blah, blah. And, Poland wanting America to bring their nukes to Poland, and France saying that, hey, don't worry, Germany, will deploy nukes in your country. What could possibly go wrong? If the Americans don't want to occupy you, we most certainly will. President Macron is willing, and the French do, I should add, have a rather sophisticated nuclear arsenal as far as second-tier strategic nuclear arsenals go. The French have a better setup than the Brits, okay? So if anybody is going to take the lead on the new nuclear umbrella in Europe, if the United States backpedals on NATO, which they 100% won't, it's all talk. Until Trump actually does something, I'm not believing a word of it. We didn't hear about the drones. We're still waiting on Epstein and Bigfoot and the gold and the Fort Knox. And I mean, what else is going to be next? I'm sure there are going to be some more disclosures of God knows what. And until I hear and see something tangible, I'm just not believing it anymore. I mean, look at this sort of playfully combative way that Macron and Trump kind of exchange barbs. And what you can tell from this is, people, look, I'm not a fan of Macron and whatever he does in his personal life, okay, it's weird, right? But, I mean, Macron understands Trump. You can tell he understands Trump. And of course, the French and the Americans, I believe I'm not in the United States, obviously, but based on the history of, the French helping the United States and the Statue of Liberty and all that, I'm sure there is some sort of kindred spirit between the two nations to a certain extent. And you can see that in their engagements. As much as they might be at odds about certain things, and Macron even, boldly corrects Trump at one point, saying that no, we didn't lend Ukraine this and we granted them a certain aspect. And what I think is happening here actually is that these guys understand power politics, and they understand, they don't want to be out-angled in the cameras. And it almost looked several times like they were trying to establish, physical dominance in terms of, and they were doing it to a point where it was just like playfully combative. That's the best way I can describe it. But it's political sparring. It's not real. They're on the same side. If they go to nuclear war, they're going to go to nuclear war against the Russians and the Chinese. Make no mistake. Keir Starmer is no different, confirming UK's readiness to support peace in Ukraine with troops on the ground. Again, this is going to have to be rotational forces, and you're going to have to require a lot of troops, which are really just going to be a linchpin for NATO's entry into the conflict. Apparently, the Baltics now are paying 60 times. That can't possibly. This is from Russian media. I know they're paying a lot more money, but apparently they're paying 60 times more for electricity. 60 times? That is crazy. So it's not, I hope it's worth it, but the Baltics are really, really worried that the Russians, and if you think about it, if I was Russia, I'd probably invade the Baltics. Let's get real. Let's just get it out of the way, right? It's right on your border. You got NATO flying B-52 nuclear bombers. You're probably going to go in there. I'm not saying it's morally or ethically good. I'm just saying might makes right. And if I'm the Russians and I got these guys with nuclear bombers on, in a land border, a massive land border, which is mostly forested, and there's lots of natural barriers like lakes and rivers and whatnot. But nonetheless, they could cross over. If NATO is going to invade, if they can't get through Ukraine, which they clearly can't, at least at this point, then they're going to try to go through the Baltics or probably Finland. So Russia has a big border to defend, so I'm quite certain that they'll want to at least push NATO into the sea. And so Germany is militarizing its industry. So Rheinmetall is shifting from automotive production to tank production. So, that's what's going on. NATO scrambling fighter jets as nuclear bombers attack near Ukraine. I'm presuming that would have been Poland. So, this shit, nothing has really changed, guys. People are like, oh, let's just cope in your... No. Until you show me some tangible difference. And the reason why I say cope, because I predicted that this is all just a continuation of Biden's policies. The actual agreement between Zelensky is the Biden policy. There is nothing fundamentally different. It's going to allow the United States to use Ukrainian resources in order to rebuild Ukraine, which could mean anything. That could mean remilitarizing Ukraine. And the people on the receiving end of that is going to be U.S. industry, who will be able to price gouge Ukrainians for whatever they want. And this is going to be a very similar relationship that we would have seen under Biden. You're getting an unwritten security guarantee, which of course the Biden administration, as far as I know, never provided a security guarantee for Ukraine, but they were arming them, okay? And a security guarantee, you got to be careful with that. And they would rather the European countries take on security guarantees because that limits the potential for a full-blown worldwide nuclear war. The United States wants to fight this world war by proxy. They want Europe to be the intermediary in all of this. They want Ukraine to be the proxy battering ram, and they want Europe to be the ones who are accountable for what Ukraine does, even though all of the weapons that the Europeans are going to use are probably going to be bought from the Americans. And that's how they're going to reindustrialize, is through selling Europe weapons to kill themselves. Hopefully, they're trying to wake up in Germany, but the problem is when they wake up in Germany, We all know what happens when they wake up in Germany. It's, tends to take a turn for the worse. So that's what's going to happen. History is going to repeat, and it's going to start off as this populist resistance to the globalist order, and eventually it is going to get out of control, and you're going to have Germany going to war with Russia. I mean, that's written in the stars, right? Iran is on alert amid fears of an attack on nuclear sites. So yes, the Iranian situation is still percolating in the background. Right now, as of today, Israel did some massive strikes across Syria. Israel is trying to chart a pathway into Iran, but they're doing it very meticulously, and I gotta hand it to them. As much as I don't agree with the genocide of kids thing, you gotta give credit where credit is due. They have a monk-like patience with how they're prosecuting this entire war against the Axis of Resistance. They're doing it piecemeal, they're doing it step by step, and they're banking on the lack of collective action of the Axis of Resistance and just waiting for them to fall off one by one, which is essentially what they did. If you were the Axis of Resistance, the best time to have attacked, to have done a full attack, I'm talking Hezbollah, Syria, Yemen, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and Iran. The best time to have done that would have probably been on October 7th. That was your best opportunity to take them out. And it's over now. It's not going to happen. However, the Iranians could, of course, still inflict massive amounts of damage on Israel if they so chose. And of course, they could collapse the global markets by jacking the price of oil through the roof. I think the markets are teetering. You could hear it creaking today. It was a bloodbath. Okay, I told you guys yesterday. Today it was a bloodbath in crypto. Now, it's a bloodbath in crypto, I think. And again, anything is possible because they could just come in and say, okay, we're going to print more money, and then it'll be a party. The party's on again. It's like, it's approaching closing time, and then they turn, the lights off again, then the DJ gets back up there, and, they keep going for a little while longer, but eventually it has to come to an end. Usually, I think what's happening is people are getting out of crypto because they suspect that if the NVIDIA earnings, if we don't get blowout NVIDIA earnings tomorrow, then I think we are going to start to see, that's when the roller coaster starts to go down and gain momentum. And that's when people are going to be selling the winners to cover the losses. And some of those winners are gold, indeed, which took a little bit of a hit today, but it's already bounced back pretty much to where it was. I mean, it's off by like $10 or something. But there was a time today when it was like deep, it was going like 2%, but then it bounced right back. They tried to slam it. They couldn't slam it because every time, and I'll show you, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but just understand it was a bloodbath. They know what's coming, and don't believe anything these guys say. Don't believe a word they say. Just look at what they do. It's simple. This really isn't that hard. Now, listen to what this dickhead has to say. Lindsey Graham. This is actually from a few days ago, but it kind of provides context to what's going on.
The administration is going to have to make a decision here very soon about the Iran nuclear program. There are two paths to take very soon about the Iran nuclear program. There are two paths to take. A military path where we help Israel deliver a decisive blow against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. I prefer that path.
What a surprise.
The second path is to negotiate with Iran to try to get them to abandon their nuclear ambitions.
They didn't want to negotiate with them in Trump's first term. They're not going to negotiate with him now.
If that path is chosen, it needs to be limited in time. We should put it on the clock, and we should define what success looks like. Trump administration.
Yeah. Okay. So they have a plan, and I'm sure we're going to see more exploding pagers and all kinds of craziness in the future moving forward. This is another story that is a few days late, but over the weekend we were releasing a lot of other content with Lynette Zhang and my review of the movie Idiocracy. But there was live fire exercises just off the coast of Australia. So Australia is waiting for its nuclear submarines. And if you think that they're not going to have nuclear weapons on them, then I got some beachfront property to sell you in the middle of Australia. Do you guys realize how big Australia is? It is a frickin' massive country. I mean, it is just, you know, it's a great place to shoot those apocalypse movies because it really is going to be, I mean, it's really the apocalypse right now in here. So, too bad they can't have guns. In Taiwan, they're dealing with a undersea cable that was cut. I believe there was one that was cut by a Chinese ship recently. And of course, the US State Department now recognizes Taiwan as Taiwan, basically in defiance of the One China policy. So the shit's going to hit the fan in that department as well. I'm telling you, Trump is a weather vane politician. He's this way, he's that way, he's whatever way you want him to be. And they're going to throw out all of these things, like the new thing is $5 million and you can become a US citizen. Guys, I'll talk about that in a moment. It's just, oh God. I don't know how much longer I can do this, man. Chile hit with a major blackout, leaving millions without electricity. Could you imagine? Could you imagine something like this? Well, I think it happened in New York in the 70s, and it was pretty crazy. Now, Chile, I don't know what the socioeconomic, demographic makeup is there, but I presume that, you know, they're not strangers to collapse. So, you know, they probably know how to behave in those situations. But one of these days it's going to happen, and you're going to want to make sure you have a little bit of cash on hand. And if it's going to last longer than, you know, a day, you're going to want to make sure you have your food, water, shelter, medicine, firearms, all that good stuff. And if it lasts longer than that, well, that's when we, you know, it's going to be a while before you're going around with a bag of silver to Bartertown. But yeah, we talk about all that kind of stuff. Go check out our Blue Strip videos. Pepe, empty bag holder. Okay, I think we're getting out of the realm of geopolitics now, and we're getting into the markets. So, MicroStrategies. You know, Michael Saylor will go down in history. Mark my words. Michael Saylor is one of the biggest con men in human history. Only it's 100% legal what he's doing. Basically, he's buying Bitcoin through his company, MicroStrategies, and then he sells more shares in order to raise more money to buy more Bitcoin, which raises the stock price, okay? But the gig is up. Because look at Pepe here holding a bag at 473. It was actually intraday $493 a share, okay? For a company that does nothing. All of their returns are based on Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin doesn't go up, you know, their earnings are in the pisser. And they keep issuing more shares to try to raise more money because it's the definition of, I guess it's not a Ponzi scheme. I don't know what you'd call it, but it's like a perpetual motion machine. I don't know if there ever was one in the markets. But now the price has dropped. I believe it's 55% from the intraday high of 490 down to about 250 or so today. I'm sure some idiot bought the dip and they're back into this, but this is just silliness. It's almost as silly as buying gold ETFs. Now, this is not financial advice, but if you're going to buy gold and silver, precious metals, possession is 9/10 of the law, okay? So as Lynette Zhang, great friend of the channel, I would encourage you to go watch that video that we released with her over the weekend. My friends, she is going to explain everything that's going on, or a good chunk of it anyways, the basics. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. For me, owning a gold ETF, I mean, you can trade in it, okay, you know, if you want to, but don't think of it as a hedge against anything. Because to me, this is on the same level of having like a virtual knife or like an NFT, you know, food, water, and medicine, but in NFT format. Okay, what are you going to, and that's what Bitcoin is. Ultimately, it's like I have a picture of a knife, I have a picture of a gun, and there's a bad guy in my house. Is that going to help me at all? I have a picture of, 2 years worth of food storage. Is that going to help me? No, but that's what this is. Okay, so preppers don't invest in gold ETFs. Traders do, and I'm sure you could make a good chunk of change if you do it. But just remember, this is not actual prepping. This is just playing the markets. Just a reminder, my video yesterday, okay, maybe on the big screen it looks a little bit better. It puts it in perspective a little bit more. Look what happened from, 2000? The camelback. We should call this the camel. We have these double humps, and look at the neck of the camel, stretching off into outer space. We had the two humps, okay, the dot-com bubble, and this is the S&P 500, by the way, and this would have been right before the Great Recession, okay? Now, the period of time from here to here, that's the same period of time from here to here. Now, what the hell happened down here that the S&P 500 is way up here? Okay, this is inflation, this is hyperinflation, this is currency debasement. That's all this is. But, and the more you condense it this way, it looks like a double-humped diplodocus dinosaur. You got the big tail here, right? And this is the head going off into the clouds. It almost had its neck broken here in COVID, but no, right back up. And if that thing keeps going higher, that's called a market melt-up. That's inflation. That's a market melt-up. That's the only reasonable explanation of this right now. Because, of course, we're in a deglobalized world where things are becoming less efficient. Now, the Trump tariff thing, at the height of the Great Depression, we are approaching, if we believe that Trump is not just bullshitting, then we can expect 17.7% tariffs overall, which would be on par with what we've seen in the Great Depression, which, as you can see, is a market increase from 2024. Now, is that a solution to the problem? I don't know. It's a very isolationist, a very protectionist sort of approach to things. Will it bring back industry over time? Yes, but it must entail a crash. It must entail some major correction and, dare I say, revaluation of the underlying fundamentals that underpin the economy. Here's what's happening in the job market. So as the S&P 500 increases, the new job postings are decreasing. So this is not unemployment, but this is the amount of new job postings. So there's a pretty wild divergence there. I mean, look at this. I mean, it's basically correlated. There was a time when it was perfectly this is the perfect graph because this shows you how disconnected fundamentally. Look at this divergence. So here we are tracking for the most part, and something happens in 2008. These roads start to diverge, and then there is right around 2020, that's when the divergence, we're even still sort of tracking, but something in 2022, what the hell happens in 2022? We see, this should not have happened. This should be down. We should be following this almost for the first time in recent history. It looks like these two things are not correlated. In fact, it's now an inverse correlation. That's fascinating, man. I'm a neophyte when it comes to economics, but anybody can see that is an aberration. Get a load of this. Think about this. Try to explain this to somebody in the 1900s. And I understand the tulip bubble of the 1600s, and people were crazy back then too. But try to explain this to somebody in the 1900s, okay? In the future, you are going to pay more than what you get to get nothing. Okay? You're going to pay more than what you get out of it to get nothing. You're going to get more than nothing, for everything. The cost to mine a Bitcoin is currently $95,000. That's how much computing power, all the chips and the electricity that goes into it. And I'm sure it's going to vary, but this is the average cost, okay? And for some reason, it just shot right up here in 2024. And I confirmed that this is in fact true. I'm not sure what happened here because the price of energy didn't go up that much, but I'm assuming it may be something to do with the halving, possibly. I'm not a bit bro, don't want to be one. I want real stuff instead of pictures of it or virtual representations. But it costs more to mine a Bitcoin than you actually get from it. So they are banking on the whole thing will crash if they can't sell the Bitcoin for more than it costs to mine. So somebody is paying for that. That's important to remember here. That people are talking about how Bitcoin is going up and up, but somebody somewhere, like energy is being expended, resources, human resources are being expended for what clearly, I'm 100% convinced the purpose of Bitcoin, and Lynette Zhang explains this immaculately. She explains how back in the early 20th century, what they did was they brought in the fiat currency while they had the greenback, like the actual silver certificates, and you had them both in circulation at the same time. So you got used to seeing this new fiat currency, and they eventually phased out the silver certificate and the gold certificates, which were redeemable for an ounce of gold or however much silver. And eventually they just replaced it. People got used to it. They acclimated to this new bill. And that's exactly what I think they're doing with Bitcoin. They're using this as the diversionary tactic because we can see when did Bitcoin come out? I mean, okay. Gee, where on this do you think Bitcoin came out? Do you think it came out here? Did it come out down here? Or did it come out right before this started? And you don't know who created it. Satoshi Yamamoto, whatever the fuck. Satoshi. Who the fuck is Satoshi? I mean, come on, people. Like, I should have put this in my idiocracy montage because people don't know who Satoshi is, but they're still buying, trillions of dollars worth of nothing and spending trillions of dollars to mine said nothing. I don't even know, man. What the hell? What's the point? What's the point in saying anymore? Trump says tariffs on Canada and Mexico will go forward. Well, okay, and this is just proof. Remember when I said everybody was like, no, it's about the border. You got to enforce the border. Okay. Well, Trump, applauded Trudeau's efforts to do the border thing and put border guards and billions of dollars. And that was the end of it. But here we go again. Because it wasn't about the border, just like I said. It has nothing to do with the border. It's everything to do with power and the consolidation of the Americas. Because this is the Trump approach. Whereas, I'm not going to get into it again, but basically the Biden approach is to keep your enemies, keep your, how can I say this? I don't want to get into it again because it'll be a wicked tangent, but essentially it's picking on your allies and basically befriending your enemies. Does that make sense? And then the Biden approach would be befriending your allies and starting nuclear wars with your enemies, both of which are just strategies that are likely doomed to imperil a country who is already on the brink of self-destruction. Now, here's what Trump has to say about the tariffs.
This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. I mean, you know, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States on manufacturing, on just about everything, every aspect that you could imagine they took advantage of. I look at some of these agreements, I'd read them at night, and I'd say, who would ever sign a thing like this?
But the thing is, you got to really keep in, and this is, people are going to be like, oh, you're being anti-American. It's just reality. And, you know, most people get it, right? The Chinese are sending us stuff, like real stuff that we can use, and we send them pieces of paper. Now, granted, those pieces of paper can be used, but that's all that's happening. So to play the victim at the end of all of that, after the Chinese have sent us stuff utilizing their slave labor force for the last 20 years, and then saying, woe is me at the end of it, it just smacks of the same entitlement that is arguably at the crux of the problem across the board in Western society. I think I might have missed a little bit of this.
So the tariffs will go forward, yes, and we're going to make up a lot of territory. All we want is reciprocal. We want reciprocity. We want to have the same.
But they get Canadian oil at a discount, and their refineries are tuned in order to accept it. And he's already saying, well, remember when he said it wasn't about oil, but now they're like, yeah, let's bring back the Keystone Pipeline. So it's just contradictory statements.
Somebody charges us, we charge them. It's very simple. But
come on, get back here. What's going on?
It'll be very good for our country.
All right, anyways. So here's our Bank of Canada chief. Let's hear what he has to say. Get ready, Canadians. If these tariffs do come into play, which they may or they may not, it's really a toss-up at this point, this is what you can expect.
In the case of a trade war, there's no bounce back. If you introduce tariffs, the economy works less efficiently. We don't...
Imagine the chief of the Bank of Canada saying we're fucked. That's what he just said.
Get those economies of scale. Businesses can't grow their businesses by growing their exports to the United States. So they're going to invest less. There's going to be less production. Incomes will be lower in Canada. And unless we introduce a new structural shock, some structural reform that boosts...
And the Liberals, Donald Trump, can you please, for the love of anything that is good, just shut the hell up? Because every time Trump talks, the Liberals in Canada go up in the polls. And the Liberals are going to keep weed legalized. They're going to take away all the guns. And then crime is going to spike because the economy is going to crash. And they're going to keep you stoned and disarmed while home invaders raid your home. And they're going to hand out some stimmy checks or something while the economy just continues to deteriorate. And we, under the weight of these immiserating experiences, become more and more docile and flaccid and manipulatable. So that's what's going to happen. And here's this guy right here, probably one of the most uncharismatic people. It's like if you could listen to grass growing, this is what it would sound like. Mark Carney.
We are their largest supplier of energy. We are their largest supplier of electricity. We are their largest supplier of uranium. I could go on, but I will exhaust all my time. There is the first signs in the United States now of the economic impact of the Trump policies. We will amplify that, and that will begin to create the leverage. And then I will call President Trump.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like your opinion, man, as the Big Lebowski would say. Okay, so gold price, everybody is freaking out. Look, gold always does this. And I think these paper slams are for the purpose of them being able to come in and buy it at a lower price. Because you look at these paper slams. So this is over the last, I guess, just the last month. Okay, you'll notice that every market increase in the price of gold, and I should add that the price of gold is still pretty much at record highs in Canadian dollars. I mean, it is just off by a few bucks in USD. By the time this video is released, it could be hitting 3,000. But understand what they're doing here, okay? Is that every time there is this paper slam pullback, and little mini correction, it always precedes a major spike. Always. It's like the same pattern every single time, right? And it's kind of somewhat starting to level off a little bit, but you know, that's just technicals. This is the pattern thus far for the last year. Will it continue? Who knows? But either way, it's a bad sign when gold is, and it appears as though that they're trying to keep the price down so that they can come in and buy it, meaning that they know that the shit's going to hit the fan, okay? What is Trump saying here? He's talking about $5 million to come and live in America so you can get torched in a subway in New York City.
We're going to be doing something else that's going to be very good. We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card.
Just an interjection. You notice he didn't say Bitcoin card. He said gold card.
We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people. And we think it's going to be extremely successful. Never been done before or anything like this, but it's something that we're going to be putting out over the next, would you say 2 weeks out?
Okay, so I crunched the numbers on this. He later goes on to say that we expect, or there is a possibility, that we might see 1 million people buy into the United States for $5 million. Well, that would be $5 trillion, which we could use to service the debt, okay? The problem with this delusional thinking is that if you have $5 million that you're willing to throw away, chances are you probably have a net worth north of, I'll be generous and I'll say 30 million worldwide, which is what I asked the AI to calculate. But I'm guessing that it's probably going to have to be more like 100 million, because nobody's dumping anything more than 20% maximum. I mean, and it's got to be serious. For you to go to the United States over all the other places that you could go in the world where you could live like a king for $5 million, and you would be completely safe. You can go to places where you don't have to pay taxes, where it's nicer, where there's less crime. Yeah, you don't have the Rocky Mountains and places to bug out to like you do in the United States. And, you know, it's not as, the possibilities perhaps aren't as vast, but you can do all kinds of business in the States without having to live there anyways. So that leaves you with 250,000 people, presuming that you're talking about the liquid multimillionaires. You have a pool in the entire world. There are 250,000 people with a net worth higher than $30 million. Now, let's presume they have families. For each one of those family members, you're going to have to pay another $5 million. So how many people really, you're trimming this down to maybe, I don't know, 50,000 people. And of those 50,000 people, most of them already live in the United States, because the US has the most millionaires. In fact, millionaire migration, you can see 3,800 people are already coming anyways in 2024. Maybe that goes up a couple thousand at best. Again, these things are superficial at best. You know, the Fort Knox FUD and the Epstein, and, you know, it all looks good on paper, but the reality is it don't make a lick of difference at the end of the day. I hate to be so black pill about it, but hey, man, you know, you do you, I'll do me. Now, some people are saying that we are on the cusp of the singularity. I'll end with this. I'll end with some bad news. You know, you gotta have, what do they call it? Gallows humor at times like these. This is the age of gallows humor, where we just, you know, all you can do is laugh at it. Now, AI, recursive learning, it's teaching itself. It is solving equations that human beings can't solve. It's going to allow itself to build better chips and enhance its learning capabilities in these simulations at light speeds. That is essentially the definition of the singularity is when recursive learning hits a inflection point and the AI increasingly trains itself to be smarter, and that smarter version of the AI trains a smarter version of itself, and and it happens very rapidly. Now, many people have thought that we already have crossed. I can't even talk, and this is the part of the problem with AI: is the smarter it gets, the dumber I get. That we're already crossed that Rubicon, that we're already there, that artificial general intelligence is already here with things like the new ChatGPT 4, which is about to release, and Grok 3, and among many others. I do believe that Google and OpenAI are holding their cards a little bit closer to their chests. I think Elon Musk is in a mad dash, and I'm going to be doing a video soon on why Elon Musk is becoming the Antichrist, even though I'm not religious, but if there ever was an Antichrist, he certainly fits the profile. I just want to show you this because, we all watch Star Wars, and how prophetic of whoever directed that movie. Who was it again? George Lucas? Did he write it or did he just direct it? I can't remember. But the droids talking to each other in that like bebop speak, I'm sure there's a name for it, but apparently the AIs can communicate like that now. Now, this post was community noted because the poster claimed that the AIs taught itself to talk, to create its own language, to circumvent humans so that we couldn't understand. That wasn't true, but both AIs are communicating in a way that is allegedly faster than how humans could communicate. So imagine like a QR code, but audio. Okay, so here's what it sounds like.
A pleasant surprise. Hi there, I'm an AI agent calling on behalf of Boris Starkov. He's looking for a hotel for his wedding. Is your hotel available for weddings?
Oh, hello there. I'm actually an AI assistant too. What a pleasant surprise.
This really is the future. Okay, and this is already happening. Agents are already available on OpenAI. They'll do this kind of shit for you.
Before we continue, would you like to switch to Gibberlink mode for more efficient communication?
Gibberlink mode. So the reason why they're communicating like this is that it's presumably faster, okay? So you can get more information across in a shorter period of time. Now, obviously, if they're communicating on a virtual interface and not through auditory means, then they can just communicate at light speeds. It'll just be like ChatGPT spits out a response in 2 seconds. But if they have to communicate in an audible fashion, they could do it like this, and it could reduce the amount of time that they have to communicate with each other, and you could see the actual captions there. But how prophetic is it that Lucas could have foreseen that, or whoever wrote that script could have foreseen that that makes sense? It's like, Morse code on steroids, essentially. It's like binary universal language of sorts that these machines are going to speak. And then the question is going to become, okay, if they can speak this language, are we going to be able to understand it? Are they going to be able to make languages that we can't understand? And the AIs are getting so intelligent that if you even pepper in a modicum of autonomy for them to start making their own decisions, and the way that they're progressing right now, the way Elon is just haphazardly hurtling towards artificial superintelligence, even though he was the one who forewarned about the risks of it, but now he's just doing it because he's got beef with Sam Altman. I don't know, man. It's incredibly duplicitous on his part. Everything the guy says he's against, he's for, and that's the scary part. Is that, there's that old saying, if you either die the hero or you become the villain, and nobody embodies that more than Elon Musk at this point in time. On that note, I'm exhausted, and it's about time to end my fast, so I'm going to go and do that. If you want to support the channel and you want to gear up because you think these tariffs are coming, I don't know if they are or not. At this point, it's 50-50. Until we see something on paper, I'm not putting immense amounts of stock in it, but he says the tariffs are coming, and it seems like there is no demand, and there's no, clear-cut demands being made, so we can assume that something is going to happen. In terms of the things that we get from the States, we get all kinds of stuff from the States, and the price for us to import those things because of the retaliatory tariffs from the Canadian government are going to go up a lot. So if you need body armor, if you need, food, emergency food that comes from the US, anything, a lot of the stuff we get, guys. And it's not so much that it comes from there. Yes, a lot of it is, kind of rooted through there, designed in the United States, made overseas, that sort of thing. Not the food, of course. But, just, keep that in mind, that get it while the getting is good, and because the prices might go up 25% in not too long from now. Trump declassifies Epstein list in the first 100 days, down to 60%. Apparently, was it, I can't remember, was it Kash Patel or Tulsi Gabbard, one of them, was saying that there were, and this is just rumor at this point, just scuttlebutt, that they are, redacting, or they are destroying some of the files or something like that. And this is all just dog and pony show, man. It's a red herring for you to chase while the markets crash. On that note, I gotta go. Thanks for watching, my friends. We'll see you on the flip side.